นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. People regularly come to the monastery and ask what the purpose of Buddhist practice is. What's the goal? And the short answer is, well, happiness, freedom from suffering. Suffering in Buddhism is dukkha. Happiness is generally translated as sukha. Dukkha refers to all the different kinds of physical pain, suffering, and then mental pain and suffering that human beings go through. Nobody likes dukkha, nobody wants suffering. Everybody wants sukha, happiness, pleasure, but of course there's many kinds of pleasure. Many kinds of happiness. But the idea of practicing for happiness, for removing dukkha, permeates the Buddhist teachings, the Buddhist path. Almost every day people come here, offer Sanghadana, and when they recite the verse offering Sanghadana, it ends with the Pali phrase, Digaratang hitaya sukhaya. Making offerings to support the Sangha is for our long-term welfare and happiness. That's what it translates as. And the basic idea of practicing generosity in daily life, offering charity, helping others in all the different ways, is for our happiness. Even though it involves sacrifice, giving away, giving up one's time, one's energy, one's things, material things. It's actually for our long-term welfare and happiness. Because at the same time as giving up these things, we're letting go of attachment, which the Buddha identified as the source of our suffering. Practicing sila, or living by a moral code of conduct, like the 5 precepts, the 8 precepts, or the 227 precepts of a monk, also is for happiness. At the end of the Pali verse for when you undertake the 3 refuges and then undertake to keep the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts, we chant Silena Sukhating Yanti. I undertake these precepts or training rules for happiness. So again, practice of sila, morality, is done for happiness, not for suffering. It's to get away from suffering. Meditation also is practice for happiness. We cultivate mindfulness, or we call samatha meditation, learning to develop mindfulness directed to an object such as the breath, or recollecting the Buddha. As we bring our mind to be mindful of the in and out breath over and over again, we pay attention to the breath, we let go of distractions, let go of what we call the hindrances. Body and mind start to relax, and we feel more happiness. It's an inner kind of happiness. It's not dependent on external material objects. It's what we call niramisa sukha, immaterial happiness, coming from abandoning desire for sensual objects, sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, abandoning anguish, irritation, hatred, abandoning sleepiness, dullness, abandoning restless worry, anxiety, and abandoning doubt, skeptical doubt. Abandoning the 5 hindrances brings with it happiness. The mind settles down and is free from a lot of mental agitation and disturbance. So you feel good in body and mind. Whenever the hindrances fade out in your meditation, meditation becomes enjoyable. We experience some level of piti and sukha, and that word sukha again. Factors of samadhi, rapture, contentment, happiness arises. Sometimes briefly, sometimes for long periods. If you practice meditation regularly, samatha meditation, then you can access that kind of happiness more and more. Of course, until one is really skilled in it, then there may be that sense of hit and miss. Sometimes you enjoy your meditation, your mind calms down, sometimes not. Sometimes it calms down a lot, sometimes just a little. And there's still some uncertainty in the practice, but generally you experience more happiness, you enjoy meditation more, the better you get at it, the more you do it. And the highest happiness comes from cultivating wisdom or insight. Because that's what actually removes the causes of dukkha or suffering from our mental experience, from our mind. And we do that through cultivating insight. So vipassana meditation also leads to sukha, leads to happiness. Sometimes just seeing a thought or a mental state, an emotion as impermanent is enough to let it go, and the mind is freed up from that particular kind of suffering. So sometimes that may happen even just hearing the Dhamma from someone else. Sometimes it's from your own insight, realizing what you were attaching to is impermanent, is not really a self. You let go and your mind is freed. It becomes happier. And deep insight means you have enough wisdom, insight that that particular kind of suffering may never return. It's finished with. It's relinquished from the mind. And with that relinquishment, usually you get rapture, happiness coming up. If you really give up with something that was painful, unpleasant, a cause of suffering, then there's a great happiness will arise in the mind when you do it with knowing and understanding. It's like you're free from a debt, free from an illness, free from something that was painful, you're free, so you're very happy about that. Sometimes it's just a waking up to the truth. Wisdom can be very quick, instant. Sometimes it's cultivated over a long period of time, constantly, repeatedly looking at something until you really understand it as suffering, seeing your attachment, seeing the craving, and just finally letting go after much practice. As I said, sometimes the wisdom that frees the mind from suffering can come from external sources. So, listening to Dhamma, hearing the Dhamma or reading the Dhamma can bring up wisdom. There was one time I was staying with Lungta Mahabua, and a lady came to see him, and she had lost her son. He died, her young son had died. And she was overwrought with grief and sadness. She's crying and wailing and sobbing and making a loud noise. He was trying to give a Dhamma talk, but he couldn't because she kept interrupting him with her crying. So in the end he stopped. He said, "What's the problem?" She said, "Oh, my son died, I've lost my son." And he just said, "Aren't you going to die?" It's like she'd never thought of that. Suddenly she realized, oh yeah, I also have to die. My son has died, I've got to die. And it just broke through her attachment to the sense of loss, losing her son. And that's only part of the story. You lose someone you love, that's only part of the story. You're still here and you're going to die too. And that's something important you have to reflect on. So he just woke her up to another side of the truth. When you lose somebody else, you suffer because your attachment, your love, your separation brings you suffering. But you're also going to die. So wisdom also brings us to happiness. Maybe a hard lesson sometimes, but when we bring our mind to see the truth, penetrate the truth, it also leads to happiness. Nati panya sama apa, there's no light as bright as the light of wisdom, because it illuminates the mind. Wisdom, insight, helps us to see where we were attaching, where we were going wrong in our thinking, and the mind brightens because we change our thinking, let go of some attachment, and the mind is free. So at every stage the Buddhist path is bringing us to experience happiness. And sometimes we forget that because as you come to practice more mindfulness, observe your body and mind, well, the first thing you tend to notice is not the happiness, it's more the pain and the suffering, the dukkha. And when we notice dukkha, well, quite often we attach to it with a sense of self. That's me, that's my pain, my problem. And some kinds of suffering are so powerful that at the moment we're experiencing them, maybe we can't see beyond them. Some illness or pain, injury, suffering of loss, suffering of anguish when you don't get what you want. At that moment we quite often don't see beyond it. So that seems to fill our mind. It's all we know. That's why another factor bringing up happiness in our practice is patience, resilience. Patience means being able to be with or bear with suffering long enough that you can see it for what it is and see beyond it. Sometimes it means bringing yourself to accept an unpleasant truth, say the reality of impermanence when you lose somebody you love. That's the truth. At first your mind doesn't accept it, so your mind argues with the truth, not happy, caught into grief, disappointment, even anguish. But over time and with patience, resilience, maybe the mind starts to settle down and says, I don't like this, but there's nothing more I can do about it. I have to accept it. Or when you get ill, your first reaction may be one of suffering. Oh, I don't like this, I don't want this. But over time, if you're patient, you may realize, once you've got over the initial shock or the initial pain, you realize, well, there's still many things I can do in this situation. If your mind is still functioning, even though the body may be weak or in pain, the Dhamma can still be applied, you can still practice Dhamma. If you're ill, you can still be mindful maybe of that illness. Mindful of pain, mindful of discomfort. And you can see through to the Dhamma. Patience will help you with that. That's why they call people who are ill patients. And all the different kinds of suffering we experience as humans, when you meet it with patience, forbearance, resilience, then other qualities of mind can come up, the wisdom can come up to deal with it, so that you can let go of your initial reaction, which may be one of dislike, not wanting, and then seeking happiness. Even wanting happiness is suffering, isn't it? How many times do you meditate and the main thought filling your mind is, I want to be peaceful. That's suffering, because if you're not peaceful, then you're not getting what you want. You'll be dissatisfied, discontent. Sometimes even it's when you realize what you're doing, because the reason you're holding on to the wanting, the mind of wanting, is because you haven't realized it's a cause of suffering. But when you do realize that, and you put it down, then the mind may settle down and become peaceful. And you'll say, why didn't I do this before? And when the mind becomes still in samadhi, there's always that sense of this is the right way for a mind to be. And what I had previously, all that wanting, the negativity, the attachment to any pain or discomfort, that was all wrong. That was coming from ignorance, coming from craving and attachment. Why did I waste my time with all that? But when you have the craving or the wanting in your mind, you don't realize. You're so used to it, you just let it take over your mind. Especially if you don't have much patience, resilience. But if you keep working with your practice, maybe at some point you realize, oh, it's the wanting is the wanting peace, the wanting happiness is the very obstacle I need to overcome. And then you realize that you have to let it go. Maybe the mind settles down. Of course, another obstacle to happiness is once you achieve some happiness, if it doesn't last, it's still not the happiness of Nibbana. You're still experiencing what you might call a worldly happiness or a conditioned happiness. And then you attach to that and you get this more discontent when it fades and you're back to a mind that is still suffering again. Many meditators have suffered with the memory of previous bliss and previous peace that they've experienced, and then not being able to attain it again. And the very dissatisfaction with what they're experiencing means that they can never get back to what they had before, because they're always caught into the wanting. Sometimes it's when you get to the point where you say, I give up, I'm just fed up with my agitated state of mind. You accept it and you let go of all the wanting, and that's the very time when you experience peace. Another part of meditation is learning when you are over-exerting, and that often comes from the wanting. You want to be happy, you want to be peaceful. So you really try, maybe try too hard. We know when you try too hard, try to achieve happiness just through wanting it, through willpower, determination. So some people have a lot of willpower, they really try. But they actually set up the conditions for disappointment, because the very wanting again, trying to force the mind to let go of things, force the mind to concentrate on an object, like the breath, doesn't work. They force themselves and they get further and further away from the very goal they had in mind. So part of the role of wisdom, or insight, is to recognize where craving is arising, where the wanting is arising. To recognize that's a cause of suffering and then let go, give it up. Sometimes we go the other way, too extreme. We get so fed up with the mind that's always wanting this and wanting that. Say, I can't be bothered anymore, and just give up. But not give up with wisdom and mindfulness. Just give up all skillful effort and just indulge, usually. Indulge in something, whether it's sleep or fantasy or whatever moods are overtaking the mind. We just give in to that mood. And that doesn't work either. And then maybe later we regret or feel guilty, realize, that's not working. There's a lot of meditation is back and forth, trying too hard, relaxing, and then not trying hard enough, and then putting forth more effort, and then trying too hard, and back again. Never quite reaching the middle way, although over time maybe you become wiser to these dynamics in your mind. Partly you become wiser because you realize from seeing the results of what you're doing, you're trying too hard, actually create stress, maybe difficult for the mind to settle down, concentrate, to see impermanence. We're not trying hard enough, there's no mindfulness at all, you just can't understand anything. When you keep seeing the results of your uncertain states of mind, and then little by little fine-tune your effort so that it's neither too much nor too little. Sometimes when we push too hard, then it comes out in the body. You can actually make yourself ill, not resting enough, not relaxed enough, too much tension. When it's too indulgent, then we tend to just not develop any continuity of awareness, and so our understanding doesn't go very deep into the meditation. You notice when the mind settles down, you let go of the wanting, you see the wanting as a cause of suffering, you let it go. It's like the mind relaxes. There's enough mindfulness and awareness to see it, but you're not seeing it with willpower, you're just seeing it with clarity and wisdom. And then there's a sense of ease in the mind, ease in the body, ease in the mind. When the body and mind feel at ease, then you don't have so much doubt. Easier to summon up energy, there's a sense of continuity of energy. The mind brightens, and then you can cope with whatever experiences are coming up. If you're, whatever moods and thoughts come up, pain in the body, it all becomes much more bearable. Maybe even fades out altogether for a while. Doubt fades because if you're experiencing an ease of mind, your mind is peaceful, you know it. So there's no doubt about that. You know, what's it like when your mind is in samadhi? You don't doubt it because you're experiencing it. When doubt fades away, then that also releases a lot of mental energy to focus on the practice. Because doubt is always an obstacle, it just stops you. You hesitate, you're non-committal because you're caught in doubt. Once doubt is removed, you feel at ease, you know you're at ease, so you're willing to commit more effort to the practice. As you feel more at ease, anger is also removed. When you feel relaxed in body and mind, then you don't get angry, even if unpleasant things are happening around you, or you're feeling some pain, or you have an unpleasant memory. You don't meet it with anger, you just know it and observe it. Oh, it's like that. Unpleasant memories are like that. Painful feelings are like that. Anger is no longer a hindrance when the mind settles down, becomes calm, peaceful. You don't feel bored or restless. You're not looking for something else to do. You're content with the object of the meditation, content to be with yourself. So again, it's a form of enjoyment. It's enjoyable when the mind settles down to just watch thoughts arising, passing away, the feelings of the body, feelings of the mind, memories, images coming and going. They don't seem to bother you very much, so it's actually enjoyable. Ajahn Chah used to say it's like when you're collecting mangoes from a tree when there's a lot of ripe mangoes on it. Your friend goes up the tree and you just stand at the bottom with a basket and the friend shakes the tree and the mangoes come down. You just collect them in the basket. You don't have to do much at all, just stand there. When your mind settles down, you've given up all the wanting and the confusion, then whatever thought, feeling, memory arises, you just know it, you just see it. You can see it arise, pass away, because you have that sense of ease. Even a very unpleasant, even a traumatic memory doesn't bother you. You just see it with the light of Dhamma, with mindfulness, stillness of mind. You just see it for what it is. A memory is just a memory. Painful feelings in the body, the same. You have pain in the leg or the back or somewhere. Pain is just pain. It's one of the qualities of samadhi. They call it malleability of mind. Workability, malleability. The mind can look, when it's peaceful, it can look at experience without getting caught up in it. You can look at a painful feeling, look at a painful thought, unpleasant intention. But there's not a feeling of being overwhelmed by it or lost in it. It doesn't spin the mind out, you just know it, oh, it's like that, and then you let it go. Just like collecting mangoes. And some people have traumatic pasts. They've had all kinds of unpleasant things happen to them in the past, so they will come up as memories. But when the mind is calm, it can look at those memories with the mind of insight, with mindfulness. It doesn't create suffering out of them, it just knows them and lets them go. When we're in a more ordinary state of mind, whatever comes up immediately agitates the mind. Any sensation in the body is agitating, any memory and thought is agitating. So the normal experience of human beings is actually full of suffering. Quite often we feel like there's no way out of that suffering. But when you invest the time and effort in meditation, you go to this, can experience this deeper happiness. Even unpleasant feelings and memories can be enjoyable to observe them with mindfulness and insight. So don't give up on your practice, even if sometimes you're not peaceful, seems like hard work, and just keep going, but keep learning from what you're seeing, what you're observing. Over time it becomes more enjoyable. You can rely on your own insight, your own understanding to free the mind from suffering, which is the point of it. Lumpur Cha used to say that Dhamma is cool, peaceful. That's the flavour of the Dhamma. It's not hot and agitated, it's cool and peaceful. But to experience that, you have to practice. It's not something you can just get by wanting. It's not something you can buy, not something you can just want. It's not something you can just switch on or turn on. You have to cultivate the right qualities of mind that will bring you to the Dhamma, to the truth. Then that coolness will arise. So I'll leave you with those reflections tonight.